This is the Rebarkable podcast with multi-award-winning dog trainer Allie Smith, where you'll learn all sorts of wonderful things about your dog to deepen your bond, solve your problems, and achieve all your training goals.
Hello and welcome to this episode of the Rebarkable podcast. Today we're going to be talking about CBD. CBD is one of the fastest growing parts of the canine industry, and it's something that is not regulated, not known much about, and it's something I think you deserve to know more about, and because there's a lot of questions. CBD is one of the fastest growing. The interest in CBD is something that's growing really rapidly, and it's totally understandable because it's marketed as something that is potentially almost a cure-all, which nothing ever is. So in order to find all of these answers, I've been trying CBD out with my 3 dogs in various formats to see what actually the truth is behind all of this marketing. Let's start this episode with what is CBD. CBD is an oil, a treat, or an extract essentially that gets included in some things consumable by pets in order to achieve a result. The results that CBD offers typically pain relief, usually via anti-inflammatories or anxiety relief, which sounds phenomenal. And when you've got dogs who are prone to anxiety or work with a lot of dogs who are prone to anxiety, it's something that you sort of go, I need to look into this, which is why I did. So CBD stands for cannabidiol. CB, which is the C, canna, by B, D. And it's actually an extract from hemp, and if it's not an extract from hemp, it would be an extract from actual cannabis, and that is not legal certainly in the United States and in the UK from my research. But if you're not in those locations and it's not actually close to this time, it's always worth double checking online or with your vet and see what's actually legal in your area, because obviously I'm doing this now in February 2022 and things change. So currently the status is that extracts of hemp are legal. However, they must contain 0, or there is usually a legal limit there is an acceptable limit of THC. THC is tetrahydrocannabidiol, and that is the actual psychoactive part of cannabis, which is what gives it its high. And obviously we don't want to be giving that to our pets, do we? I would always encourage you to make sure that whichever brand you're looking into, that you thoroughly research them first, because there is a huge problem in this sector of pet care, because essentially it's not regulated properly, and you only have a company's word to validate the product or see whether it's something that will work for you and your dog. Now, the best way that I've found to do this is by looking at the lab reports from certain companies. For example, I looked at the lab reports for the company that I chose and approached to work with for this investigation, which was Austin & Cat, who were very, very good. There we go. And they essentially gave me a lot of guidance and a lot of how to use it, what it is, what it does, why it does. And that's kind of what I want to share with you. That's your what. So CBD comes in a few forms. It comes in the oil that I just showed you. We've got a few treats. Treats are much harder to regulate because the recipe in itself and the mixing process essentially means that it's going to be very hard to get a pure distribution throughout that recipe. Personally, I've been using the oil as preference because, again, as I said, I have 3 large dogs. So mine is actually even the extra strength version because, 3 large dogs, even when you get the low concentrations, means that you're using quite a large volume of the oil, which then gets quite expensive. So buying it or obtaining it in the extra strength means that you don't have to use as much. So that one's just for money saving purposes, would be my tip there. It has zero change, because I have actually tried the lower concentrations on my dogs, and it doesn't vary between the extra strength and the regular strength, so long as you follow the appropriate dosages on the packaging and on the bottle. Speaking of proper dosages and things, when we're looking at how to use these things and how to bring CBD into our dogs' lives, I will always suggest that you do it slowly. I would pick very, very calm days to start, because you want to get a baseline. Not all dogs are going to react to this the same. It's really important that you do your own tests, essentially, because it's not regulated, because you don't know where it's going to go, or even how your dog is going to handle it. For example, Indy doesn't do that well on a full dose of CBD. It's not that it affects any of his internal systems, but it absolutely affects his behavior in a negative way. So the way I would always recommend to introduce this is to work up slowly. Look at the maximum dosage that you're meant to give your dog, whatever the guideline says on the box, on the packaging or similar, and start off at a fraction of that. For example, if it says that you're meant to use up to a single milliliter within a day, then maybe give them 1/8 of a milliliter and see how they do. See how that changes their behavior. See if it changes their behavior at all, because it might not. But we want to make sure that their insides are okay with it, that their behavior doesn't change adversely. And we want to see that it has the desired effect, ideally, or when it has the desired effect, right? So you start off at 1/8 of a milliliter, you work up to 1/4, you work up a little bit more until you're getting to the point that you see the change. And for me, like I said, with Indy himself, he couldn't do the full dosage because it was almost like it made him forget his manners. And it was a case that I found that his sweet spot was about half of the recommended dosage, which worked really well for him whenever I had needed to do it. But I will get into the situations where I've used it a little bit later. Whereas with the hounds, they thrived at about 3/4 of the dose that they were meant to have. So just because that says a recommended dosage, it does not make that the dosage that your dog should receive. Please do test it, please do look at it, and please do monitor your dog's behavior from a baseline and to decide whether this is the most productive way of using the product. And once you've run those tests, you can then either use it sort of intermittently for a spontaneous event. So if something happens that's beyond your control and your training isn't quite where you need it to be, this is a great time to take advantage of the CBD, because essentially it creates, to me, it can bridge training, and it can mean that you don't lose training, and it can mean that you can keep progressing as opposed to not. Or you can, of course, use it in a more continued fashion. That more continued fashion can be for pain management. It can be for pain relief. It can be for genuine behavioral problems. However, if you are looking at longer term usage of CBD, I would always consult your vet. And that's a very good point. I should also say I am not a vet. I am a trainer. This is my personal insight into this. It's not necessarily a medical guide. If you do want more information, please do talk to your vet. Please do talk to them. As long as you've got a fantastic, responsible vet who is doing their research, you will get a great, reliable opinion. There are a few things to be aware of when we do look at CBD. There are a few instances where CBD is not an appropriate choice for your dog. And largely that is if they've already got internal problems. So if they've got organ issues, if their kidneys aren't functioning right, if their liver's not quite operating how it should, these are the times that you should just be not considering CBD in the slightest. If they're taking any pre-existing medication, again, probably not for you. Or if they're struggling with things like dehydration. It's also good to note that CBD can actually increase anxiety. It can cause diarrhea. It can mask pain very much in a similar way to if you've ever tweaked your back or something like that. You take some painkillers and go, oh, I'm okay now. And then you do something and you make it worse. Pain is there for a reason, and it often stops us from hurting ourselves more or doing more damage to something that's already damaged. So if that is the case with your dog, then it could mask more pain and create more problems. So that's a very good thing to be aware of. Obviously, do not exceed the recommended dosages. Do not go overboard on that. Start low, work up, and focus on your dog's well-being, not on anything else. And speaking of that, CBD is absolutely not, and I really do mean this, CBD is not a replacement for training. Under no circumstances should you be medicating a dog before trying to adjust their behavior with training. Okay, especially not self-medicating your dog. That's not an acceptable way to deal with a problem, because it's not going to deal with the problem. It's just going to cover it up for a little while. Yeah, please don't do it. Not worth it. I promise you. If you need help with anything like that, give me a shout and we'll book in a bark day or similar, and we will get you and your dog through whatever it is that they need to get through. Potentially with the aid of CBD, but probably not. So, yeah, it's a very, like most tools in the industry, if you use it right, it works really well. But if you try and use a collar to pull a sled, it's going to cause problems for you and your dog. So let's have a quick chat about how I've used it, what experiences I've had with it. And I'm talking the good and the bad here. So let's start with one of the bad times, because I like to do the bad stuff first, because I feel like it gives you guys a really good insight into the process and that there are potentially drawbacks. So I was using CBD with Lucy, testing it out with her and seeing how it would go and finding that sweet spot that I talked about. And it turns out I must have given her the wrong dose at the wrong time. And this is why I say it's really important to do it when your dog is at a normal, so at a general, I'm happy, peaceful, I'm not stressed about anything state. Because I clearly caught Lucy when she was slightly more stressed than I thought she was. And as a result, it actually spiked her anxiety. It actually made her worse. And it's really good to know these things, because there is a very fine balance to be struck. Essentially, you can learn from my errors, and that's a good thing. So yeah, take away from that one. Make sure they're at a normal before you use this. So don't use it when your dog is already stressed and you're walking into the vet's office. That's not going to work. Use it when they're at a calm point in the day, and then build them up through the event, not in any other way. So, and a good example of that was how I used it with Shelby for July 4th. So my being British and living in America caused this moment of pure ignorance, and I can't say it in a better way, that when we came round to July 4th, my very first in the US last year, I had no idea that there was going to be as many fireworks as there was. I knew Shelby had a problem, and I knew that she was scared of the loud noises, and I had been working with her through this. However, I thought there was going to be a couple. I had no idea that there was a local display. And yeah, consequently, my training wasn't quite where I would have hoped it would be come the night of July 4th. And that was when I first started really, really testing with CBD, because I was like, I want something that's going to bridge this and push us through this as opposed to me losing all this training that we've done with Shelby. And with a little bit of help from Austin and Kat, bless them, we got Shelby through it. Shelby nailed it. Shelby is pretty much now through her fear of fireworks. We've not really had any incidents since, because I didn't lose any progress through that night. And the way we did that was 2 or 3 days before the event, we started Shelby on a very low dose. Okay? Because this then kind of eliminates the element of trigger stacking or general increases in stress. We started at a very low dose 2-3 days before, and I would put it in with mealtime. So they'd get a dose in the morning and a dose in the evening, and it would be a case that it'd be a very low dose to start, a slightly higher dose, and slightly higher until I brought it up to the maximum. And I think she was on the maximum for about 24 hours prior to fireworks. But that was to cover anybody who was going to be letting off fireworks early and making sure that didn't add into Shelby's stress levels. So I used it there and bridged her through that gap or that potentially problematic area. And it worked a treat. And then I weaned her off it on the other side, and it was all very simple, very easy, and she had no issues. We had a very peaceful fireworks night, which I wasn't expecting. So I was very pleasantly surprised. Another example of where it's gone wrong would be with Indy when I got him to a too high a dose for him. So as I said earlier, there is a bit of a sweet spot for your dog and how much CBD that they will thrive on. So we had guests over, and essentially I wanted to make sure that the dogs were just a smidge easier, because one of the guests we had was older, was less able, and I didn't want my 3 large dogs, who cumulatively weigh more than most people, causing more damage than they needed to, given that we've not seen a huge amount of guests since COVID happened, and actually since I've been in the States. So whilst they were on lead and whilst they've been trained for these things, it was just a fail-safe and an opportunity for me to test. So we did, naturally. And what that led to was me finding that Indy was actually less able to focus on higher dosages of CBD, which meant that all my training with him, all my ability to direct him, change him, and rely on his cues kind of went out of the window. So, yeah, there's a sweet spot. Find it for your dog. And I found that his anxiety decreased and his behavior remained the same at a lower level of CBD. So good to know, and it was something I found out for further usages. So yeah, let's talk about Indy again, actually, because the other time I used CBD was with Indy when we did our flight to America. This was CBD that I bought in the UK. It's not the same as the Austin and Cat stuff, but it was my first real look into CBD. Because I had, again, another situation that whilst I could do a certain amount, that final little piece was going to be missing. So for Indy and the plane ride, I made huge efforts to desensitize plane noises inside the cabin and outside the cabin, to desensitize the airport itself, to desensitize the volume of a plane in actuality, and to do every process that I possibly could. The only thing that I couldn't do was mock up the situation within the cabin, because that's a pretty unique situation. I mean, we did public transport, we made sure that we'd done things in that area, but I feel like an actual plane cabin is quite unique. And wasn't something I could really mock up that well. So the first flight that we took, I knew could be a problem. And I didn't want it to become a problem, because the flight from the UK to the US is 8 hours long. And if I had a very stressed German Shepherd on a plane for that long, that's not very good for anybody. And whilst I was quite certain that it wasn't going to go that way, Indy's great in human situations. In anything human, he excels. But there's always the time that it goes wrong. And I'd spoken to the vet, and the vet had sort of said, we can't actually medicate him. So, we can't give him Xanax or anything like that, because it will actually interfere with his ability to respond to turbulence. And that was something I'd never considered. But instead, I went for something that would just try and bring him down. We tried valerian root and things like that previously and had very minimal success with it. I'd not noticed any real difference in Indy and his behaviour whilst using valerian root. So I tested out some CBD before we left, made sure he was fine on it, and then used it for the plane. Again, that one was because it was a shorter period that we had to get through, and I didn't think it was going to be as much of a problem as the fireworks would be for Shelby. We did, I think it was about a quarter dose for breakfast and then half a dose before we got on the plane, and then we went onto the plane and he was absolutely fine throughout. And we didn't actually bother giving him a second dose on the plane despite the 8-hour trip. So from my experience, that worked really, really well. It was a case that he became just that little pinch more relaxed, and I know that he settled very, very quickly on the plane, which was awesome. Whether we can totally attribute that to CBD, I can't exactly say, but I don't think it hindered any in that situation. So the point of all of these examples is that you can use it as a bridge. You can use it as a 5 or 10%, but you cannot use it as a replacement for training. Okay, that's how I've found that CBD works the very best. And when coupled with training, it does make things easier. And if you do need any help with any of this, please just let me know. I'm always happy to talk about these things. I'm always happy to go through these things with you, because there's not a whole lot of information out there, and it gets very confused very, very easily, because it's quite complicated. And having had first-hand experience of it and being a trainer with good insight into dogs, I would like to think, it's something I can help you with. And whether we have a quick chat on Instagram or we book in a full bark day to look at your problems, we can do that. That's something we can do. And I am totally confident that we can get you through whatever it is with your dog that you're struggling with. Again, I would advise, if you're looking at this as a long-term solution, that you do talk to a vet. However, if it is a bridging training activity, or you would look at it in that context, that's certainly something I can help you with. So, thank you very much for joining me today. I'm hoping that you found that really, really useful. As always, if you can like, subscribe, follow, do whatever it is that you need to do on this platform to help this platform grow, I would very much appreciate it. Thank you very much, and I will see you next week.
Thanks for listening to today's episode. If you want to help this podcast grow, go rate, review, and recommend to dog lovers everywhere.